The new Sheffield Shield season has produced another display of dour, unimaginative cricket as Tasmania and Queensland played out a draw in which a result hardly felt attainable across the 4 days. My name's Willem van Denderen. Welcome to Shield Informed. We're 2 draws from 2 so far this season. To break down the latest of those, I'm joined by my 2 colleagues. Firstly, Donna Siramani up in Maroubra. Welcome back to the program. Am I meant to stay for you and everyone in New South Wales? You're out of lockdown and instead of hitting the streets, you're on the Shield Informed podcast.
I know. Look at the things I do for you guys. I could be out clubbing. No, I'm joking. It's crazy for New South Wales. But I think the most important thing for everyone is getting a haircut. That's been the top of the priority list. So, I mean, I definitely got a little bit of a trim. So, yeah, that's New South Wales.
Nicely done. Yeah, I couldn't wait. I had to get my girlfriend's mate to do it for me. I was assured that she'd worked at a hairdresser's. I got there. Turns out she had worked there in admin. She had the old clippers, no spray bottle. It was a real backyard effort. Brodie Hoyne, you and I are still very much in lockdown, mate. 254 days and counting. So there's been plenty of time for you to watch Queensland and Tasmania over the past couple of days. How are you tracking out there in Gisborne?
Oh, it's beautiful out here in Gisborne. Regional Victoria has a bit more leniency at the moment. But it's still, all in all, pretty shit. But the good thing I was able to do was watch a bit of cricket over the weekend. Saw some really good individual performances. Again, another road. We haven't been blessed with pitches. We haven't been blessed with pitches this season so far, and honestly, another bit of a stinker, to be fair.
Now, if you can hear some scratching in the background, you'll have to forgive our man Brodie. He is committed to Shield in 4, but he is at the same time a single parent because, as he said in the last episode, he has got his dog on board. What's the dog's name?
His name's Roger, and I'm not even kidding. As I was speaking then, he bit me on the nuts. I'm not even joking. He got me on the nuts. The
Roger Dodger, he's only a young pup, but he's already lived quite the life. I believe he's got a fair bit of nautical experience. Could you maybe explain how he came into your possession?
Roger's a rescue pup who was living up north, up in the QLD, and he was living on a boat for his junior part of his life, and obviously didn't really work out for him. So I put my hand up to say, boys, I'll take it from here. I'll look after Rog, and it's going really well. It's being really annoying right now, but apart from that, it's going really well.
Oh, you're a good man. Well done, and fantastic to have Roger on the podcast. Let's have a look at Queensland, Tasmania. That's going to be the first of 3 parts of our show today. The second part, it will be Donna and myself will wrap up Australian and India in the women's tri-format series. And then later in the show, we're going to welcome back our good friend, the pinch hitter, Tom Penn, to the program. England, it was a bit of a will they, won't they? Now they definitely are coming, and they've named their Ashes squad. So Tom and I will have a bit of a yarn through the names listed there. But on to the first part of the show, Queensland, Tasmania. Usman Khawaja said he was disappointed that Tassie declined to make a game of it at Karen Rolton. They did, of course, declare 145 runs behind late on day 3, looking to generate a result. And Donna, when we were speaking in preparation for this show, the word was bored, disappointed. It was pretty frustrating, and it wasn't just us. It was Merv Hughes on commentary. It was Usman Khawaja. It's not the best of Shield cricket that we've seen over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I hate to be the cricket lover that says cricket is boring. I hate it. It makes me just like, I don't want to say it. But look, I understand the argument of, okay, you want to declare really late, you want to declare at 500 because you don't want to lose. But at the same time, I think in the spirit of the game, you want to have a contest. And there was no way after they declared at 500 Tasmania that Queensland were ever going to manage to chase that down. And I think from then, everyone kind of knew. And as you said, Merv Hughes in commentary, who was very behind the whole idea that, it wasn't in the spirit of the game and it wasn't fair play. So I think from day one, you kind of got the idea that it was going to draw. And I think watching a test where it's going to draw just kind of takes a bit of the fun out of it.
Yeah, Brodie, you and I have traditionally been big advocates for the bat once, bat big attitude. But the issue is, at times, you can take too long, especially in 4-day cricket. Now, this was a match where not a ball was lost to rain. There were no sort of mitigating circumstances. It was just boring, dull batting from Tasmania.
Yeah, it really was. And I think the fact that, Queensland, particularly in that first innings, they used 8 bowlers just trying to do something different, just trying to do something like try and break the game open in some way. it just went to show that, as Donna said, it was probably going to be a bit of a fizzer from the get-go, and which is a real shame. And unfortunately, I think Tasmania didn't want to back themselves a bit. They obviously probably had they definitely had the weaker lineup of the two sides, and they didn't really back themselves in for the rest of the game, hence why they played the way they did. But obviously some really strong individual performances from Tasmania, Tim Ward, Jordan Silk, just to name them off the top. Maybe they should have. I think that's the sort of thing they need to do heading forward if they want to stop being that cellar-dweller team and actually be a threat in the Sheffield Shield.
We're big fans of Beau Webster on this program. He does it all. He bats, he bowls spin, he bowls quick. And on this occasion, he was actually the captain. And the finger has been pointed at him a little bit because, as we said, Khawaja made the declaration, and then it's up to Webster as leader of the Tasmanian team to come to the party as well. So I just think if Tim Payne or Matthew Wade was captaining the side, there might have been a little bit more interest, Donna, in looking to generate a result. So you can understand that Webster, as a young captain, first time out, would have been keen not to sort of open the door for a disaster. But I think at that point, then the question has to go to those around him, and not just the players, but the coaches. I think Greg Shippard was interim coach during this one. So while Webster's a young captain, it's a team effort. And a squad effort, and I think that's where Tasmania failed as a collective. I don't think it's fair to point the finger just at Webster.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Willem. I think when people are pointing fingers, cricket is a team sport, and he's not making that decision on his own. You know, there are people in his ear giving him pointers, telling him what to do. So I don't know whether a change of captaincy would have affected that. I mean, if we had Wade or Payne, sure, they'd have a lot more experience and probably feel that they would have a lot more control over the situation. But at the same time, it's not a one-man show.
I think having Wade or Tim Payne there could have been a bit of a difference maker. Those two, as you said, quite experienced heads, and they played a lot of cricket. They might have shown the cojones and gone, nah, we need to dig in here, boys. We need to have a crack. Otherwise, what's the point of even being here? And I think it would have come down to those senior heads. Can't really blame it on Beau Webster, in my opinion. I agree with you there. I think, it's too much to put on the first-time captain, I think. But, having some more those more senior heads in there would have helped them out a lot, I reckon.
Let's roll through the game blow by blow. So the final scores were Tasmania 6 for 500 declared and 3 for 196, drew with Queensland 5 for 355 declared. So Tasmania and Beau Webster won the toss on the opening morning and elected to bat. And that first day very much did belong to Tim Ward. Now, he's from Western Sydney, another one of these guys behind a fair few at New South Wales who hasn't had an opportunity there. So he's moved down to Tassie. This was just his second first-class match, and it was a very composed 126 not out that he made. He put on century stands with both Charlie Wakeham and Ben McDermott, and at stumps, they were 3 for 285. So even then, Donna, you could think they're maybe a little bit behind the run rate. On a wicket like that, you probably want to be looking at least 300 going by the old Ricky Ponting playbook.
Yeah, because, I mean, it was a bit of a road of a pitch, but in saying that, that's going to affect the bowlers, you know, and I think that there was a lot that the batsmen could have done. Tim Ward did really step up. I mean, he's just, like you said, a lot of New South Welshmen get stuck in the system a bit and think that there would be opportunities elsewhere. And I think he got 180 in a club cricket game for the University of Tasmania, and then he almost got another century in the following innings as well. So I think also with bringing in the night watchman, who was a night watchman for
Neil Smith.
Yeah, so we're moving a little way ahead there, but it was in the first innings, it was Neil Smith.
Yeah, Neil Smith. I think that was a conversation about sort of the run rate being really quite slow as well, and there was a lot of criticism about Tasmania sort of trying to increase the speed of the game, but they weren't able to do that, and they were really falling behind.
On the second morning, Jordan Silk batting down at 6 made 100 off 131 balls. So he did get the run rate going a little bit as they moved towards that declaration of 6 for 500, 2/3 of the way through day 2. So I thought that actually worked for them, Brody. A little bit of a change up there. So Jordan Silk down to number 6, and Tim Ward, he looks to have stamped his papers to be the opener for the next little while at least. To the bowling figures, Michael Neser, 24.4 overs, 2 for 60. Michael Neser, 24.4 overs, 2 for 60. Mark Steckety, who was playing in Sam Heazlett's kit after he had his own kit burgled along with Jimmy Pearson prior to the match. He bowled 27 overs and took 2 for 87. And spare a thought for old Matthew Kuhneman, who was in for the absent Mitch Swepson, 51.2 overs, 1 for 151.
Yeah, he'd have a sore arm after that day, surely. Who's the lucky bastard who's got who was it? Jimmy Pearson and Mark Steckety's kits. Geez, you'd be looking for those on Marketplace, wouldn't you? A couple $100, do you reckon?
Yeah. Maybe it's some of the Tassie guys. Maybe they took it.
Fine. Yeah, they're a bit changed now, aren't they? Decent fine. Nah, look, it was they tried everything. You said Queensland. They really did. I mean, as I said before, 8 bowlers they used, including Bryce Street, who I don't think we've ever seen have a trundle before at Sheffield Shield level. Matthew Renshaw
took a wicket.
I don't know, unbelievable. And Matthew Renshaw was there for just the sole over. But yeah, as I said, it was just they were just trying their best to see what they could do, but to no avail on such a pretty ordinary pitch, to be honest.
Queensland reached stumps at 2 for 122, and Tassie just pried a little opening for themselves. Wickets to Froggy Freeman and Neil Smith, but Bryce Street was in his zone by this point. He was on 49 not out, and the next day he'd move along to 143 off 334. That's his 4th first-class ton. That average has ticked up to 42 now, and I reckon he'll 100% play for Australia as an opening batsman if he continues on this trajectory. Jimmy Pearson, who Brodie thinks is just no more than an honest stayer, proved him wrong once again with 106 of 168. Froggy Freeman, 33 overs, 2 for 92. And Rainbird persisted well and got some reward at the end. 21 overs, 2 for 80. And yeah, at this point, it was the critical juncture in the match. Usman Khawaja came to the negotiating table, declared at 5 for 355, 145 behind with an hour to play on day 3. Tasmania reached stumps at 1 for 59, and this was the point when Neil Smith was brought in as the night watchman Donna, and he dotted him up. He did his job, but the issue was he was then there the next morning, and he did not play a shot for the entirety of the first session.
Yeah, I think his run rate for that third innings was 35.32. So, I mean, he ended up getting 71 not out of 201 balls, but yeah, there was definitely, I mean, at that point, his job was to just take a shot, and it didn't happen. So, look, I can understand it, but at the same time, the game was in just such a position that even if he did, it was going to be a draw. There just wasn't enough time.
Well, I think ultimately, yeah, it wasn't even his decision. He was batting alongside Tim Ward, who made another 81. He did really well. But those guys both said it was team directive. We went out there that morning, and it was said that they didn't back their bowling lineup, which was obviously without Jackson Bird, without Nathan Ellis, not even to take the 10 wickets, but to maybe hold it up if Queensland went out there, started blazing a few runs, and the game got away from them. So yeah, it wasn't Neil Smith's decision to go out there and effectively stymie the game, but I call him Neil Smith, Lawrence Neil Smith. It wasn't his decision to go out there and stymie the match, but alongside Ward. They batted out the better part of the 4th day, and then pretty farcical but somewhat beautiful scenes, I called it on Twitter, as firstly Usman Khawaja and then Joe Burns rolled down and over a piece before they shook hands. Let's go into this in a little bit of detail. Firstly, Brodie, what did you make of Khawaja's action? The third ball in particular was an absolute piss take. He held it in the left arm, put it into the right arm, and then delivered it with the right arm again, shaping his shoulders this way and that. Yeah,
just trying something different. I loved it. I love Usman Khawaja. I really like that they did that. 9 bowlers used in that second innings by Queensland. Honestly, the only thing that's sort of bad about that, it's a piss take. But you know, this is top form domestic cricket, and we're and I love it. But it's a shame that that's where it got, isn't it? Like, the game was all well and done. It was done. It was over. Love to see Usman Khawaja, Joe Burns have a trundle, but yeah, just to take, as I said, it was a piss take. Joe Burns had a maiden, by the way, which was pretty decent. It was like Matthew Wade when he did it for Australia, but nowhere near as good. So yeah, it's just a shame that that's how the game got. The first two games of the season, pretty well, just were fizzes, and it's a shame. We really need to see some competitive, decent domestic cricket, and also we really need to see the other two teams, New South Wales and Victoria, get involved, which I'm sure is on the horizon, but unfortunately we're going to have to wait a little bit longer. Just rounding out on Joe Burns, it was said earlier that Kuhnemann would have had a sore arm after bowling 51.2 overs. I reckon Joe Burns would have had a sore arm after bowling his one. That round arm wrenching shoulder action was just horrendous, Joey. Donna, what did you make of it?
Well, I'm sure Usman Khawaja and Joe Burns would love to tell us all that they each have just, one first-class wicket each to their name. So maybe they were hopeful, putting themselves in. They thought, you know what, maybe I can add a couple to that total, to my stats. Yeah, I did kind of feel like it was a bit of a piss take, especially at that time in the match. I was just like, okay, now we're really trying everything, aren't we? Literally everything to make this pitch do something. Like, so that's what it was to me. And I think a lot of that was, there was a similar sentiments in commentary as well. But yeah, no, I loved it. Why not? Try it.
So in that second innings, every single player, bar Jimmy Pearson and Bryce Street, had a bowl. And Street had, of course, a bowl and took a wicket in the first innings. So that led us to the draw. Man of the match, deservedly Tim Ward in just his second first-class appearance. Well done to him. Expect to see him at the top of the Tasmanian order for the rest of the season.
In regards to Tim Ward, high praise from Tim Payne over the weekend as well for Tim Ward. So just want to point that out. Definitely one to watch in the future for Tasmania. He's obviously made that right call going from New South Wales to one of the lower states. I won't say lower states, but really we do understand that some of there's a plethora of talent in New South Wales and Victoria, and they do need to branch out to get their opportunities elsewhere. So he's another one to go down that path, and all the best to him. He's only 23, so the world is his oyster at the moment.
And the great thing is we've got more Shield cricket scheduled. Next Friday, the 15th of October, South Australia will host Queensland, not at Karen Rolton Oval, but the Adelaide Oval return to South Australian cricket's traditional home, and it'll be the same for Western Australia at the Wacker. They'll be hosting Tasmania there 2 days later on Sunday, the 17th of October. Stick around. On the other side of this, Donna and I will wrap up the Australia and India Women's Tri-Format Series. Australia has won their multi-format series with India 11 points to 5, finding their best form late to win the final to 2020. So, Donna, this to me throughout the entirety of the series felt like it was almost brilliant. It was nearly there, but it just didn't quite hit the heights to make it an all-time classic series. The one-days in their own right were magnificent, really. Australia ran away with the first one, but then were very lucky to escape with the second one. And then in the third, India got the job done and broke the world record streak. I think the momentum was then sapped out of the series by the reigning test match and India perhaps batting a little bit too long at times. And then the first T20 was flying through its first, however many overs they got out, 5 or 6, and then that was washed out, and then the series was just about done. So would you agree with that sentiment? There was some really good cricket on display, and it was nearly there, but just didn't quite get there in the end.
100%. It wasn't due to the fact that either of the teams didn't want it badly enough. They fought as hard as they could, as much as they could. It was just unfortunate that it was the rain, and I was so upset, especially with the day-night test match, and I really wanted to see the pink ball in action under lights a lot more than we got to. We lost the night on day 1 and day 2, and we didn't get to see the pink ball under lights until day 3, so that was essentially a day lost. And it is kind of emotional because it's the first time since 2006 that we've gotten to see the contest, and it's just upsetting that rain got the better of it. And washing out the first T20 as well. It just has a knock-on effect, especially with the points and everything. So I'm not disappointed at the performances. It was so entertaining. I'm just disappointed at the weather.
Certainly not the first cricket match or cricket series in history that's been sort of ruined by the weather. So we covered the one days in the last program, so let's sort of drill down on the test a little bit. India, they were criticised at times for perhaps batting too long, especially late on day 3. I guess similar to what we've just seen with Tasmania and Queensland. When you have a 4-day match, and especially when you lose a bit of time, there isn't an unwritten rule that if you do want to see a contest and a result at the end, you might just have to come to the table and negotiate. And India didn't do that, so they were criticised in some quarters for that. Now, do you think that's fair, or do you think that's maybe a result of these teams not playing Test cricket enough? So, I mean, if you don't play, you can't be expected to get it right in the situation every time.
I mean, yes, that's a part of it, but also I hate the fact that you only get 4 days, because if it weren't for that and you had a whole extra day, those decisions would be valid, and clearly, like when we were talking about Tasmania and Queensland, Bo Webster, there's other people sort of telling them, what to do. So I think it was the same sort of idea. Let's make as much as we can. But of course, when it ends up that it becomes a draw, it just means that there is that criticism on the team batting first. So they ended up declaring on day 3 post the dinner break. 8 for 377. They could have declared earlier, but also keeping in mind they lost a whole day. So I don't feel like it's appropriate to put too much criticism on them, considering they lost so much time.
I think back to the test, and we're sort of over a week on now by the time we record this, and your main memories of it sort of start to crystallise. And for me, it will be from this test match, Smriti Mandana opening the batting for India. She's fast become my favourite player, made 127 and 31 in the test. She also made 52 in the third T20 and a very impressive 17 or so in the first 2020 before she went out as well. Her pull shot, the way she tucks into the cut shot, the way she just just a classic test match batter. Delightful innings, really, at the top of it, and particularly the pull shot.
Yes, I totally agree. She's so textbook and classy, and I really like that about her. 127 of 216, as you said, and there was a ridiculous amount of fours in there as well. I don't know how many. And then there was 1 6 as well to bring up her century, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, it was so entertaining to watch. She's been consistent throughout her whole career as well. She's definitely a staple in the Indian side. And, yeah, she's just a joy to watch, as most of the women. I also think that Deepthi Sharma did a really good job, I should say. She got 66 off 167, but the way that she went about her innings was also really classy and really measured. And like you said, these women haven't gotten the opportunity to play much Test cricket. And considering that, you wouldn't even have known it, really. I mean, I don't know, Willem, would you agree?
The application to Test match cricket was certainly not an issue. As I said, Smriti Mandana had the temperament. A lot of the players had the temperament. It was more the overall management as a group of a Test match, which was perhaps left a little bit to be desired. But of course, as I said earlier, that's to be expected. But in terms of the actual players playing long format cricket, not an issue in the slightest. And I think one thing we've seen across this series is that when the Indian Cricket Board back the women's program as heavily as they back the rest of cricket, I think they will be leaving Australia, England in their dust pretty damn quickly. Let's move on to the Australian side. For so long, you'd just expect Lanning, Perry and Healy to be the main contributors, but later series for those three players, key performances though came through Beth Mooney, of course, and then Talia McGrath in the T20s. And I thought Nicola Carey, as I said in the last program, was really good throughout the first ODI. So the Women's Ashes is coming up in January, or on January 27th, so just after Australia Day. So did you see this as not a changing of the guard, because those classy players will be back to their best, but a time in which Australia's second tier stood up or emerged to a degree to win the series?
I definitely think so. I mean, it's awesome to see that there are just so many young players coming through, young bowlers coming through, really good all-rounders, like you mentioned with Nicola Carey, and seeing Talia McGrath just bring it home for Australia with her 44. That really just derailed the second T20 for India. They had it, they shouldn't have lost it, and then she scored 2 really classy boundaries, and that was it. And to be young and sort of go out there and really take on an innings like she did. I mean, it just shows that not only does she have the skill, but she also has the temperament. And those two things together are what make really good cricket players at a really high pressure level. And she really showed that she could do that. Elise Perry and Beth Mooney, Meg Lanning. I think it's interesting because we spoke about last episode, Elise Perry kind of being criticised for not showing up as much. But in the second innings of the test, she put on 68 and that avoided the follow-on for Australia. So it's important to note that. But, of course, when you have a whole bunch of young players coming in, that discussion does sort of come through. But I think it's a great thing. I mean, the amount of bowlers we've got, I mean, there is some people saying that maybe we play too many bowlers, but at the same time, like, I think it's good to have the talent. And yeah, while maybe you could say some of the more experienced players are sort of getting on a bit, I still think that they show up when they need to. I think also Ash Gardner is a really good all-rounder as well. She got a 51 to support Elise Perry in that second innings in the test, and that really helped as well. The declaration was historic as well because it was the first time since 1984 that a touring women's team had declared in Australia. And there was
Right.
that really interesting moment at the end where Mitali Raj wasn't sure that she wanted to actually declare and have that agreement with Meg Lanning. And later at the post-match conference, she said if they had gotten wickets quicker, I think they wanted to get 4 really quickly, they wouldn't have. So it's good. Like, you know, they want a result still, which I think is lovely. Like, it's great to keep the spirit of the game. And even though, like we said, it was a rain-affected test match, you know, there was still a lot in it right till the very end. So that was good to see.
The Australian bowling obviously suffered without the experience such as Megan Shute. Molly Strano wasn't there. But so all of the young talent was sort of pushed forward at once, and that can sometimes be disastrous, but I think they acquitted themselves pretty well. Annabelle Sutherland, Stella Campbell, and Taylor Fleming. Fleming came in for the T20. So who of the 3 stood out to you the most?
It's hard because I don't know if I see Taylor Lemonick as sort of making her way in. So, I mean, there was discussion, I think, for that they were trying to use her for only 2 games, and they were deciding which 2 games to use her for. But she definitely came in with force. She took 3 wickets in that second T20. So she really did make a huge difference. I think also Sophie Molyneux is has a really big impact on the game as well. So yeah, I think the young bowlers definitely stood up, but they've got that really good support and captaincy as well. And, you know, I think there was a bit of commentary on the fact that because we had so many bowlers coming in, especially young bowlers, that Meg Lanning was just putting in people to give them a go. But I don't really see it like that, because even though everyone did have a bowl, it didn't change any strategy or didn't really affect sort of the flow of the game. Everyone showed up. And I think it's also a testament to how well we're kind of forming the Australian women's game here in Australia. I think that there's a lot of exciting things to come.
Just a couple of other notable instances to round out on from across the series. Firstly, Taylor Fleming was clocked at 145 kilometres an hour. I think the speed gun might have had a little bit of a moment there, but she herself laughed it off. But her pace was incredible in all seriousness. Average of 121.8, maximum of just a tick under 127 kilometres an hour. So particularly in the, you know, as we've seen with quick bowlers in the men's game, a 4-over burst, if you can bowl that speed, it's very handy. Stretch that out into 10 overs for the one-day stuff. And the ball of the century so far, Shikha Pandey's ball to dismiss Alyssa Healy in the second T20. That was a genuine off-spinner bowled at express pace. Healy herself was as befuddled as Mike Gadding at Old Trafford all those years ago. That was a serious delivery.
It was so good to see it. Actually, another point we have to make is just what the pitch was doing for those T20s. Oh my God, the deviation. And that was probably why we had such low scores as well. Not probably, definitely in those T20s. But yeah, that delivery was insane. It clipped the top of off stump, and I think the reaction was almost as good as the actual delivery itself. It was just replayed over and over again. She was just jumping into the air and fist pumping, and it was great to see. It was such good excitement, but yeah, awesome delivery. I do not blame Alyssa Healy for saying that she totally missed it. I kind of missed it too. I'm glad they replayed it a million times, because I was like, wow, it was good.
And on the agenda for these players now, the Women's Ashes doesn't start until the 27th of January. But we, of course, have the Women's Big Bash starting this Friday, I believe.
I'm so excited. Yeah, the Sixers and Melbourne Stars. It's so good. Also, because we're watching the Shield without a lot of the East of Australia, it'll be nice to sort of see that come back a bit. And we'll talk about it as well on the pod, won't we, Willem? So there'll be lots to sort of break down and discuss. But after this series, oh my goodness, I'm so excited to see what the WBBL has to offer, especially because a lot of the Indian players that we've seen in this multi-format series are playing for lots of WBBL clubs. So it's going to be the best summer ever.
Magnificent. No, I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much for the chat. Donna, stick around. On the other side of the break, Tom Penn, the pinch hitter, he returns to Shield Informed. After weeks of posturing and politicking, the England cricket side will tour Australia this summer, with the first test to begin in Brisbane on December the 8th. Michael Vaughan thinks they could get done 5-0, but if there's one man who'll draw hope from the 17-strong squad named this week, it's Tom Penn from the pinch hitter in Tooting in London. Tom, welcome back to Shield Informed. How are you, my friend?
Cheers. Well, yeah, no, really good. Thank you. Really looking forward to having a chat with you. If I'm looking forward to the Ashes, I probably is not the case at the moment. But I like the fact that you've got me down as an optimistic voice. So let's see if I can sort my pessimism out.
I had a couple of introductory questions to ask you, but they've been thrown into disarray by our off-air chat. I had a feeling that you are a family man. You mentioned that you're married and you have a 2-year-old daughter or a 13-month-old daughter, and I asked what her name was. And why don't you let the audience know how you've gotten away with one of the great names?
Yeah, well, so her name is Inzie. We'll spell that Inzie. And when it came to coming up with names ahead of her birth, we didn't know if it's going to be a boy or a girl. I was trying to throw in some West Indian cricketers' names, which were all getting I was all getting told where to go. And then I just chucked in Inzie, thinking there's absolutely no chance this is going to get the green light. But lo and behold, it did. And yeah, we can see what other names can potentially come up with in the future. But Inzie is now a girl's name, and we'll see if she becomes a Test cricketer with a few run-outs under her belt as she grows up.
Outstanding. That's fantastic. You are over there in the UK, out of lockdown. You've moved on from COVID-19 seemingly, whereas here in Australia, we're still in complete disarray with our states sort of bickering back before we were federated all the way back in 1901. So for your English cricketers, it's after their tough 18 months on the road, it's been completely fair enough that they wouldn't want to come back here and basically head back 6 months in time to the dark ages and spend time in quarantine. Did you ever, to me, it didn't forever feel like for a second they weren't actually going to come. Do you think that's fair enough, or was there real concern that maybe Joe Root and his boys would pull the pin legitimately?
I think there was, I'd say this time last week, after the ECB put out a statement saying we're going to decide on Friday if we're going to go ahead or not, then suddenly it did become a bit of reality, I guess, that the tour could be postponed or could be cancelled or whatever. But it's been bubbling away for about 3 months, maybe longer, since about maybe mid-July, when I think the likes of Joss Butler kind of made it clear that he wouldn't just go based on anything. And then it got to the point where I think Joe Root was saying a month or so ago that pretty much nobody was going to go. Maybe like Anderson and Broad had said they would, but it was looking like could we send out a complete squad of nobodies plus Anderson and Broad? But yeah, so I think there was a genuine chance at one point. I'm still not 100% convinced it's going to go ahead yet. And I think at some points when we were thinking, there was a bit of a thinking of, well, if Ben Stokes can't go, if we're going to have these pretty tough quarantine measures, could it be worth putting it off for another year? It's not going to go straight after the T20 World Cup. We're in awful form, etc., etc. So yeah, I think there was actually even a little bit of hope that it might get called off. But we are where we are. I did start getting excited last night. Literally, I was just looking at Wikipedia Ashes series, just looking at the number of draws and the fact that England have actually got a better win percentage in Australia than Australia.
Oh, is that right?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, it keeps the earlier series there, but yeah, I suddenly got a little bit of excitement, which has been lacking. I'll be honest, for the last couple of days since the squad was announced. Let's
cast our view back to how this English team has developed over the past 12 months. Now, since January 2020, when Australia played their last test, England have played 12. At that point, you would have thought that's advantage England. You're going to have a full 12 months to bring a new crop of players in. You're going to embed them in, experiment, pick what you like, get rid of what you don't like. But it hasn't quite worked out that way. And as recently as the last couple of tests against India, some pretty structural change at the top of the order with help me out here, Sibley going out, Crawley coming out, incoming Haseeb Hameed, and the recalled David Malan. So would you say that this team is as settled as you would have liked it heading in? Has the last 12 months been a bit of a good opportunity wasted, or has it still been a far better use of time than Australia sitting there not doing anything at all?
Well, yeah, I'd say it probably has been a better use of time than sitting there not doing anything at all and refusing to go to South Africa and all the other things.
Yes.
And sitting on their Tasmania radio shows, shouting stuff at England. But that's fine. That's all part of the phony war. And I'm learning to just ignore Tim Payne, which is fine. But yeah, the fact of the matter is England are a bit of a mess with their test team. That they had all these grand plans for the year of rest and rotation, and we were going to come to Australia and for the T20 World Cup ahead of it, just in perfect condition. Everyone was going to be fine, and we were going to be absolutely buzzing. And the fact of the matter is, we are not. Joe Root is absolutely buzzing and is on fire and has been incredible this year. If it wasn't for Joe Root, I think we'd have probably lost every single test match so far this year. The fact of the matter is we have him. He doesn't have a test century in Australia, which is something which I'm sure he'll be keen to sort out this time. But yeah, we're in a mess. I mean, Moeen Ali was vice captain of our last test match. He's now decided that test matches are too long. And got a bit bored. So okay, vice captain, thanks. So he's out. On the side of the openers, I was a big fan of Dom Sibley, but the numbers didn't lie. And he kept on he kept on digging deep, and then straight after lunch he'd just play an awful shot and get out. And I think my only hope was that his just really slow scoring would frustrate Australian bowlers, crowds alike. Hasib Hamid seems to have a few more shots about him and has looked in good nick. That said, I think he's maybe got 3 ducks since he came back into the England side. Milan, really pleased to have him back in the team. It does look a lot more solid with him in there. But I'd quite like to see James Vince in the team. I think that for me would give us our best opportunity, because without Stokes, yes, Joe Root's been absolutely amazing this year, but the previous 2 years, Stokes was far and away our best batsman. And people talk about him being a great all-rounder. He is, but for me, he was our best batsman. And the runs which we will need in Australia are a big miss from not having him there again, because as we know, it's not the first Ashes series he's going to miss.
No, it's not. So, yeah, let's talk about that, the absence of Stokes and Archer a little bit more. So a 17-man squad has been named, 10 first-time tourists. I think it's an okay squad. It's unsurprising, and I think they'll be more than capable of challenging across 2 or 3 days. But to not have Archer, who's been, we've known for a little while he's going to miss with his elbow injury, and to not have Stokes, who's battling dual issues of taking time out for mental health and also a broken finger, do you think that you'll have the ability not just to compete, but to take 20 wickets and win matches? Because those 2 guys are the X factor for me, which have the ability to get over the line on foreign soil. Whereas, the rest of the squad, I mean, even Broad and Anderson, who have been imperious across the globe, a little more than honest toilers in Australia with the Kookaburra in our conditions. So, how do you think? Do you think you're a real chance to win Tests without Stokes and Archer?
I mean, my optimism deep inside me says we will, and I think the reason for that is Ollie Robinson came into the side this summer and performed absolutely brilliantly. Jimmy Anderson had a great summer, but Robinson actually outperformed him and out-bowled him. So I think he's one to watch. He's not Archer pace. We're missing Ollie Stone as well, who would fit into that category. But he's tall. He's quite aggressive. The kind of words we like to use about Australian bowlers. So that's the hope that he could do well. So he gives me a bit of hope. But what doesn't give me hope is is just the lack of runs that we've been able to consistently make. It got slightly better when they made those changes and Crawley left the side, Sibley left the side, Hamid and Milan came in. I don't really understand what Crawley's done to deserve a place on this tour. There's a Lions tour which is going to be going alongside, so I'd have thought he'd be more relevant to be on that one. But yeah, that's where my worries are. Is with the lack of runs to then give our bowlers the best opportunity. And a lot's been made about the fact that Jimmy Anderson's second innings averages are way higher bowling wise than his first innings. And I think the main reason for that is our batsmen generally don't give our bowlers enough rest time. And they're back bowling again. Jimmy's almost 40, and he does need to put his feet up for at least 2 nights. and he's just not getting that opportunity. So yeah, they're my kind of my worries. I'd like to be optimistic. If there's a positive there, I'll find it. And I did actually make a note of 3 positives, which I'll share with you. My reasons to be optimistic is number 1, Joe Root and all of his runs. Number 2, I don't think Australia are that good. That hasn't prevented us losing 5-0 before. But also number 3, I think, is the schedule. Traditionally we do better in Melbourne and Sydney. That said, we've lost 5-0, well, twice, and 4-0 in 3 of the last 4. So we're not that great there. But having those 2 tests as the 3rd and 4th gives me a bit of hope as well. So yeah, who knows? I'm clinging to a couple of positives there.
I want you to pick your first, or your balance of how the bowling lineup is going to look. So watching from afar, as you mentioned, Ollie Robinson has clearly been the pick of that 12-month sort of revolving door in the England side. 28 wickets at 19 across his first 5 tests. He's picked alongside Anderson, Broad, Craig Overton, where he returns to the country where he made his test debut. Chris Wokes, who's sporting an older, wiser, sort of more silver look these days, but just as effective. And Mark Wood. Now, the hope has always been that Mark Wood, who's an Australian-style bowler, might be able to actually do some damage in an Ashes series. But unfortunately, I just don't think you can back his body to stand up across 3 or 4 or let alone 5 tests. So taking all of those guys, putting them in the mixing pot, and then we'll consider the spinners after this. Who do you think will be the frontliners?
So I guess for the first test at the Gabba will be what we'll be looking at for this. Is we definitely would want to unleash Mark Wood there. I think Ollie Robinson should probably be a shoe-in now as well. After 4 or 5 months rest, I'd have say Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad coming back from injury now, but Jimmy Anderson really should have no issues there. So how we line up with all of that? I mean, Chris Wokes is traditionally the fall guy, but he came in with virtually no red ball warm up and performed brilliantly at the Oval, which was our last Test match, because obviously the final Test at Old Trafford got called off. So I'd like to see him in there as well. Whether or not it's the question of, a lot of the time this summer we seem to be picking a bowling attack with the our batting lineup in mind, which is probably how someone like Craig Overton would get a chance again. Not to say his bowling is awful, but it never seems quite penetrative enough at Test level. So all those things consider, Mark Wood, great, but as you say, is he going to stand up to all 5 tests? I doubt they're even considering that. So we may as well unleash him in the first test, as far as I'm concerned.
The spinners that are coming along are Jack Leach and Dom Bess. Now, you made your thoughts known on Dom Bess last time you were on Shield Informed. And Jack Leach, some of the commentary I saw online was that he was unlucky to be left out of all of those home tests against India. The now retired Moeen Ali was preferred. My question is, so I think traditionally in Australia, you probably want to pick your 6 bats, your keeper, and fortunately in your case, your keeper can bat, and then you want to pick your 4. So how can Jack Leach, if he's asked to play a holding role as the off spinner here, how can he come in, having not been backed in at all over the past 6 months, with any confidence that he's the man to do a job in hostile conditions against aggressive batsmen on wickets that probably won't suit the holding off spinner?
Yeah, very good question. I guess he'll have to point towards the India series in India earlier this year, where the pitches were a lot more helpful. But he did a brilliant job in there, completely outbowled Dom Bess, and led the attack well. He was caught back into the squad for the test in Old Trafford that didn't go ahead, and there was quite a bit of talk of him playing there. I'm not sure if I said this last time I was on, but Jack Leach he's literally the most unluckiest person in the world. He's had various illnesses, and I think he must have had COVID 3 or 4 times, but he's still there. He's a kind of player who things get chucked at him, and he tends to bounce back. So I'd love to see him in there, but again, it goes back to what I said previously. I think that we tend to be looking for runs from our bowlers as well, which maybe that approach will change in Australia. But fitting him into a 4-man attack when you've got Anderson or another bowler who really doesn't bat much at all is the struggle here. But Jack Leach is loved in this country. What he did at Headingley, we will never forget, and particularly against Australia. So yeah, we need to back him, and he's far away our best spinner.
And what about the spinner not picked? Here in Australia, we hear sort of distant rumblings of 24-year-old Lancashire spinner Matt Parkinson, an aggressive leg spinner, quite a different spinner to Leach and Best. Do you think that this is an opportunity missed in not being a little bit more aggressive, or the right call at this stage? What can you tell us about an audience who know nothing about him?
Yeah, no, sure. So he's, as you say, kind of an aggressive attacking leg spinner. I guess a bit more probably in the mould of someone like Mitchell Swepson from what I've seen. Gives the ball a real big spin, and yet every now and then does get tonked, but takes wickets at the same time. He's done very well in white ball cricket, and has been picked for England, I think, in T20s or maybe ODIs. I'll check. I think it's T20s. But yeah, what Chris Silverwood said back in, I think it was maybe May, the start of the international summer here, was that he wasn't gonna. Well, he didn't want to pick players for the Ashes who didn't have any international test experience. So that's clearly been held against him. I'd love to see him in the squad ahead of Dom Bess. But I think Parkinson will certainly be on that Lions tour. And as we saw with India last year, being on a backup tour, not even being in the original squad, doesn't mean you can't play and doesn't mean you can't have quite a big impact. So whether he's ready, I don't know. But as you said at the top of this bit, we need people who can take wickets in Australia, and maybe, just maybe, he will be that man as the series progresses.
Do you think maybe they've learnt their lesson after sending Scott Borthwick and Mason Crane to the slaughter over the past couple of seasons? Couple of tours.
The list is quite long there, isn't it? I mean, I don't. But those picks were kind of a bit of a punt, weren't they? And they didn't come off, and we just chucked them in at Sydney when we were 4-0 down, or 3-0 down, I think, in Mason Crane's point. But I guess the annoying thing is that this whole year England have been like, we've got this plan, we're going to rest, rotate. As I say, we're going to turn up in the best possible shape, and that's just not been the case. So I think. Just because something was a good idea in May or June doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be what's going to work out best for us. So, we need to take 20 wickets, and that has been our issue. So it could be his time.
Rory Burns and Haseeb Hameed will open the batting to start the series, you'd suspect. The other batters on the tour, Joe Root, David Malan and Johnny Bairstow, who have been here before. Ollie Pope, Zach Crawley and Joss Butler have not. So how do you think they'll structure the side? Do you think they will go with the 6 bats? And if so, who are the 4 to fall in behind the openers, obviously with Joe Root?
Yeah, so you have the openers, then Malan, who obviously hit a century at the Wacker.
He did, yes, Ashes ton. On debut, perhaps?
It wasn't his debut. He debuted back in the summer here, and I think he played in at the Gabba in Adelaide. Prior to that, that was definitely his maiden Ashes century. Bairstow seems to, he always finds a way back into the team. I think he's got 2 centuries in Australia as well. So he'll definitely that'll definitely add to his chances of being picked. And he did maybe get a half century on his latest recall this summer. And they always say, they like Bairstow's attitude. He loves a fight. He loves to prove people wrong. The annoyance is that people tell him he's wrong many times.
That sounds like an Australian selection criteria.
Exactly, and that's
he's a good bloke.
Yeah,
he's a good bloke.
Cracking bloke. He's great in the dressing room. So that as well. But Butler will no doubt be he's vice captain, and he'll have the gloves. And they always try and get Ollie Pope in the side as well. He's definitely the man ahead of Zach Crawley at the moment. He signed off in the county championships with a double ton at the Oval, where I think he averages over maybe just over what Bradman averages at the Oval or something like that. Expect Ollie Pope to go. He's flattered to deceive a little bit over the last 12 months, but there's a good player there, and he did very well in South Africa, which I guess is what we can class as similar pitches to Australia when we were there almost 2 years ago now.
And a final question, I just want to allow you the platform to indulge in your love of Branderson, 4th and 5th tours respectively. And when you consider a couple of the pastings that these guys have been on in Australia, the hunger and the professionalism to put things right is clearly there. Broad on the comeback trail from a calf injury. Unfortunately, he missed the home series against England, but by all reports, he's going to be good to go. And Jimmy Anderson as well. Yeah, no,
as you say, like they just keep on going. I look back at the 2010-11 series, which I think is the only series which I like to look at from an Australia tour, and Anderson was absolutely incredible in that series. And the funny thing about Anderson is he is still getting better. Some of his spells this summer, against a decent India batting attack, admittedly not in their best conditions, were incredible. So I still back him. I think I've said before, I'm hoping that he's going to get the chance to play with England Test cap number 713 at one point.
Yes,
613. Yeah. That's still something I'm itching for. Obviously, us picking a squad with no players who've never played a Test before doesn't help that case. But yeah, he's not looking like he's over the hill yet in my book. And Stuart Broad has, the last couple of years since he got dropped ahead of the first Test and the first biosecure bubble test we had, he's been brilliant. If nothing else, he's a great pantomime villain in Australia. So I'd love to think it wouldn't be their last tour down under. Let's be honest, it probably will be for Anderson. Broad will probably fancy another one, but yeah, we will always be backing them. Just if they can get some support around them. I remember the last tour, they both bowled brilliantly in terms of economy rates and things like that. Australian batsmen were very keen to not take any risks. So yeah, they've still got a lot to give.
Well, Tom, I'm ostensibly a fan of the Australian cricket team, but I'm an even bigger fan of good competitive Test cricket. And for goodness sakes, I hope your boys get it together and can win a Test or two and give us something like we saw last summer when India beat Australia here. There's nothing wrong with that. To finish, mate, a prediction. Oh, no, we're still a long way out, aren't we? We're 7 weeks out. It's an early squad, but I guess that gives us more time to build up and more time for Tim Payne to chirp off when provoked heavily to pass some sort of comment.
Absolutely, and he has been provoked heavily, and I can't deny that. I think I'll give you a few predictions. One prediction I think is I'm still not convinced the series is going to go ahead. Another prediction would be again how they often talk about this England team being when they're great, when they're awful, they're awful. We don't seem to see that when we're in Australia. We just tend to be awful. So maybe we'll have one of our great days and snick one, maybe two Tests. But at this point, I'm still this is an optimistic person here. I'm still thinking probably 3-1 Australia, something like that. But it pains me to say that.
Fantastic, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us once again on Shield Informed. Make sure you go and subscribe to The Pinch Hitter. If you haven't, it is as easy and as free as it comes, and it gives great benefit every day to make sure you're across everything happening across the world in cricket. So, Tom, once again, thanks for jumping on the program.
No worries. See you soon.
That's all we've got time for today on Shield Informed. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Thank you to Tom. Thank you to Brody. Thank you to Donna. And thank you to all the listeners out there. Enjoy the matches, the Shield matches starting late next week. And we'll catch you on the other side of those to wrap them up on Shield Informed.